want to take you back to your childhood. For some of you, that was an epoch ago. For others of us, we can think back fairly well to our childhood. What was your favourite game as a kid? You know, for me, it was hide and seek, especially around Nan's house, because Nan had this really big house, and she had loads of little nooks and crannies that you could hide away in, and no one could ever find you. And if you remember what hide and seek's like. Someone would say, right, you run off and hide, and I'll count to 20. And they turn their back and they go, 1, 2, 3. And you think, oh, I've got to find somewhere to hide. And you run all around the house, and you think, I know, I'll get into the bathroom, and I'll stand in the shower and pull the shower curtain. They'll never find me there. And you stand there, and you stand there for a while, and you think, I'm not so sure this is a great place to hide. And so you think, well, I'll pull the shower curtain back, I'll get out into the hallway, and I'll find somewhere else. Just at that point, this person's going 17, 18, 19, 20, and they turn around and the cry goes up. I'm coming, ready or not, ready, and you're not ready because you're in the hallway and you've got nowhere to hide. And I've discovered as I've gone through life that you never feel ready for what life throws your way, do you? You just don't. You never feel ready. I mean, you start going to school that first day at school in your little short trousers and you're just a little bit worried. You haven't got mum and dad to run back to and you just don't feel ready to be on your own at school. Then you get a bit older and you go off maybe to university. You know, and mum and dad have left you in your little cell on your own. And you think to yourself, how on earth am I going to cook my Sunday lunch pot noodle with a kettle? I've no idea. No one's ever taught me that. And how do you make a washing machine work? You know, see, I just don't feel ready to live on my own at university. And maybe it's that first day at a new job. And you think, are my colleagues going to like me? Will the boss like me? Will I be able to do the things they're asking me to do? I just don't know. I don't know if I feel ready to be out in the world of work. And then you start dating. And you go on that first date. And you've never been on a date before. What do you do on a first date? And what happens if they lean in and I have to do my first kiss? I've never done a kiss before. I mean, I've been practicing at home on the mirror, of course, but... Oh, was that just me? I don't know. I don't know. What are you supposed to do? And you just don't feel ready for a first date or a first kiss, and then you get married, and, you know, you stand in a church, and the vicar says, "Dost thou take this woman or this man?" And, you know, you think to yourself, I've got a life full of dusting now, and I don't know if I feel ready for it. I really don't. And then the first kids arrive, and you think to yourself, hello, I don't feel ready to be looking after a human being. My eldest son, Matt, I remember when he was born, although 27 years ago now, I remember when he was born, the week before, we'd bought a new stereo system for the house. And it was great, it was lovely, you know, stereo sound sounded good. And when it came out of the box, it came with an instruction manual this thick. And in the back of the instruction manual, there was a phone number to phone in emergencies. A week later, I'm in the hospital, they put this human baby in my arms and say, "Thank you, Mr. Banks, have a nice life." And you think, there's no instruction manual, there's no emergency number to call. You expect me to be responsible for this little thing? Just don't feel ready for it. But here's the truth. If we waited until we felt ready, we'd never go anywhere or do anything, right? Honestly, if you waited until you felt ready, you would never get up and go anywhere. You'd never do anything because we never really feel ready. Now, I don't know if you realize this, but there's a little not ready story from the life of Jesus. Matthew is an eyewitness to the life of Jesus, and he writes down everything he sees about the life of Jesus, and we still have Matthew's writings today. And Matthew, at the end of his writings, chapter 28, Matthew tells us about this little not ready moment in the life of Jesus. And it's sandwiched between two huge moments in the life of Jesus. The start of Matthew 28, Jesus, who was dead, who did have nails in his hands, who had a spear in his side, who was wrapped in grave clothes, put into a tomb and left for dead for 3 days, he was alive again. He was resurrected. There were rumors of this man, Jesus, who was dead, now alive, walking around the place. That's the start of Matthew's eyewitness account, Matthew 28. The end of Matthew 28, Jesus is giving his followers a big commission. It's called the Great Commission. He's giving them a plan, he's giving them a mission, he's giving them a task to do. But right in the middle of those two huge moments, there's a little not ready story. So, if there's something you know you should be getting into. Like Joel said a minute ago, a next step that you should be taking, but you just don't feel ready for it. You're in good company. I'm going to show you why. Hopefully by the end of this, you'll know how to take that next step. So let me just read to you what Matthew writes. He says this: Then the 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to 11 disciples. I thought there were supposed to be 12. We'll come back to that in a moment. The 11 disciples left for Galilee, going to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. So this is a James Bond moment. You know, Jesus, before he died, had said to his followers, look, I am going to come back to life. When I do, and you hear the rumors, you know that mountain over there? We'll meet there. Synchronize your watches. We'll meet at that time. And so the disciples are off to meet the resurrected Jesus for the first time on the mountain. What happens when they saw him? They worshipped him. Of course they worshipped him. I mean, he was dead and now he's alive and he's standing in front of them. Of course they fell on their knees and went, wow, Jesus. But some of them weren't too sure. Some of them decided they were going to stand back in the shadows like, what is this trickery? It's freaking me out. Who is this guy? I'm just not too sure. Some of them doubted. So let's go back. 11 disciples. See, you and I really, we don't flinch when we read this word, 11 disciples. But a first century audience, I mean, this would have caused them to take a sharp intake of breath. Why? Why? Because 12 was a super important number to the ancients. The ancient world was fascinated by numbers. And so just for a couple of minutes, if you don't mind rolling your sleeves up with me, we're going to dive into the ancient world. I want to teach you something because I think it's fascinating. They were fascinated by numbers. So one of the numbers they loved in the ancient world was the number 3. Number 3 was a holy number. It was about holiness. Number 3 is about everything that goes on up there in heaven. And so often when they sang songs, the songs that are recorded in the Psalms, right in the middle of the Bible, often they would sing about God's holiness, and they would sing about it 3 times. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The temple, the church they used to meet in, had 3 parts to it all. There was the part where the people went, there was the part where the priests went, and there was the Holy of Holies. The Holy of Holies was where one priest was allowed to go once a year because that's where they believed the presence of God was. In fact, when the priest went into the Holy of Holies, he had to have a rope wrapped around his stomach and it would drag out beyond the curtain so that if the priest met with God and he fell flat on his face and died, they could drag the body out without having to go in. 3 parts to this temple. And of course, God himself is a God in 3 parts. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, a triune God, the Trinity. Now, God expressed in 3 different ways. 3 was a really important number to the ancients. The other important number was the number 4. The number 4 wasn't about what went on up in heaven. It wasn't about holiness. It was about creation. It was about mud. It was about earth. It was about objects. 4 was about what goes on down here. And so, like us, they talked about the 4 corners of the world, north, south, east, and west, even though it's round. They still talked about the 4 corners of the earth, north, south, east, west. And then every object had a height, a width, a length, and a breadth. 4 was about everything that goes on down here. Now, the product of 3 times 4, when earth and heaven collide, when heaven comes down and crashes with earth, when heaven and everything up there meets with you and I on earth, that number, 3 times 4, the product of heaven and earth together, 12. I mean, 12 was a super important number to them. It was the most important number. So the priests in the temple would have garments, gems sewn into their garments. How many gems? 12. They would have 12 gems in their garments. There were 12 solar calendar months that people ran their life by. There were 12 tribes of Israel. You read this in the big story of God. That God's fame on planet Earth was represented by 12 tribes full of his people. Full of his people. Problem is, 700 years before Jesus is born, around the 722 BC, those tribes have been reduced to about 2.5 tribes. You had the tribe of Benjamin that was doing well, the tribe of Judah that was doing well, the tribe of Aaron was kind of half full. God's people had abandoned his way. They'd gone their own way, and his fame on earth was failing. And people were waiting for the day. For centuries, they were waiting for the day when God's tribes would be full and his fame would be again cast abroad on planet Earth. And so Jesus comes into this scenario, and how many disciples does he enlist? 12. Did he do that accidentally? No. He did it controversially. You see, most rabbis said, I've got some teaching I want to teach. Anybody who wants to follow me, you just go ahead and follow me. Come on, let's go. Jesus went, no, I don't want you, and I don't want you. I do want you, and I do want you, and I do, no, I don't want you, but I do want you. He chose 12 people. 12 people. 12 disciples. Because Jesus was saying, God is recreating his plans for his fame on planet Earth to fill up his tribes again, and he's doing it through me and these 12 men. And when you get to the end of the big story of God, the last book in the big story of God is the book of Revelation. And 12 is all over Revelation. I mean, there are 12 gates of heaven, and in each gate there are 12 pearls. That's where we get the phrase, the pearly gates, from. And there are 12 foundations for these gates, and these gates are guarded by 12 angels. And there's a tree in the middle of heaven which is feeding the people, and the tree is full of fruit. Can you guess how many different kinds of fruit are on the tree? Right, there's 12. 12 is everywhere. In fact, Revelation talks about the number in heaven being 144,000. I mean, that's just a symbolic number, because it's 12 times 12. It's the tribes of God being filled up again, and God being famous again, God's people being back with him again. So do you see, Israel loved the number 12, and the disciples absolutely loved being the 12, because God is doing something again, and he's doing it through us. So back to our little not ready story. Jesus is about to commission his disciples to go out on mission, the Great Commission. There's only 11 of them. That's why there would have been a sharp intake of breath. There's only 11. They're under-resourced. They don't have what it takes. And on top of that, some of them worshipped and some of them doubted. So Jesus doesn't just have a quantity problem, 11, not 12. He has a quality problem. Some of them are just not sure about their faith. And it's to this group of people that Jesus says, my entire mission is resting on. I don't have a plan B, I only have a plan A, and that's you. You people who are doubting, you people who don't feel you've got everything you need, you under-resourced people, it's you that I'm calling to change the world. You see, Jesus doesn't say, I've got a plan for you, got this great commission to give you, but hey, why don't we just hang around together? Because there's only 11 of us. There's not quite enough of us. Let's wait until we've got enough people. Maybe if we hang around on this mountainside for a week or two, or maybe a month, somebody might wander past, and we can do a few interviews and see whether they fit with us. And then we can be 12 again. We'll be resourced, we'll be full, and we'll be ready to go. And Jesus doesn't say that. He doesn't say, I tell you what, some of you are doubting right now, so let's not go out on mission. What we could do is we could have some Bible studies, and we could sing a few worship songs, and I'll care for you, and we'll just close out the world, and we'll stay together, and we'll just sit cozy, comfy, and, and then maybe your faith over months, years, maybe it will grow, and you'll be strong, and then you'll feel like you won't doubt anymore, but you'll be able to worship me, then we'll be ready to go out. Jesus doesn't say that. Jesus says, I'm sending you out, ready or not, ready or not, I'm sending you out. And this happens all over the big story of God. It's not just a one-time moment. Back in the Old Testament, God comes to this ancient character called Abraham. He's an old man. He's 100 years old. And God says to Abraham, Abraham, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to build a new community of my people. And they're going to come through you and your children. And Abraham says, you've got to think again, God. I'm 100 years old. The missus is quite old too. We haven't got any kids. We're infertile. We've been trying for ages. And they're not going to invent those little blue pills for at least 3,000 years. So you need to choose someone else, God, not me, because I can't be a father of a community of people. You've got to be kidding. And God says, I know you don't feel ready, Abraham, but I'm calling you and I'm sending you out, ready or not, ready or not. And God comes to this other character, Moses, and he says, Moses, I want you to go to the Adolf Hitler of your day, to the evil Pharaoh who's been holding my people in captive for centuries. I want you to go to Pharaoh. I want you to stand in his court, and in your biggest voice, I want you to say, Pharaoh, let my people go. Enough is enough. You're going to do that for me, Moses. You know what Moses says? Moses says, pick someone else. Because Moses had a stutter. God says, no, I'm going to send you anyway. And Moses says, no. You need someone who's eloquent. Someone like Joel, who can speak really beautiful with a little South African twinge in the side of it. You need someone like that who's eloquent and brilliant with words. Not someone like me. Can you imagine me standing in front of the Pharaoh, telling him what to do? They'd laugh at me. God, pick someone else. I'm not ready. I don't have what it takes. And God says, I know you don't feel ready, but I'm calling you, Moses. And I'm sending you out, ready or not. I mean, I could go on. God comes to Gideon, this little lad who's hiding away because he's afraid because the enemies are pressing in. And he's hiding away amongst some farm equipment. And God comes to Gideon and he says, hey, Gideon, mighty warrior. And Gideon says, no, you've got the wrong, no, you had the wrong person. God says, Gideon, I need you to save my people from the enemies that are pressing in. And Gideon says, you're kidding? Not me. I'm the weakest. I'm the least important. I'm the scrawniest. Look at my muscles. I don't have any. You need someone with Popeye-style muscles, with tattoos on their arms. You don't want someone like me to lead the armies and to save the people. You've got the wrong guy. God says, no, I haven't. I'm calling you. And I'm sending you, Gideon, on mission, ready or not. Ready or not. God comes to Jeremiah. And says, Jeremiah, all my people have wandered off the path. They've turned their backs on me. They're ignoring me. Jeremiah, I want you to call them back onto the path. And Jeremiah says, no. You've got the wrong person. I'm too young. I haven't started shaving yet. I'm just a kid. No one's going to listen to me. If I go and say to the people that have wandered off the path, come back onto God's way, they're not going to listen to me. They need someone who's old and wise with grey hair or preferably no hair. That's the kind of person they need. They're not going to listen to little old young me. No one listens to young people. God says, I know you don't feel ready, Jeremiah, but I'm calling you and I'm sending you out, ready or not. See, when God calls people all the way through his big story, all the way through the Bible, no one ever jumps up and says, me, I'm ready. I'm the one. Yes. Everybody says, you need to pick someone else. And I'm not ready. And God calls people whether they're ready or not. You know, my wife, Debbie, she's a intensive care baby nurse. So she works in intensive care, but she specializes in looking after babies. She's a sister in this intensive care baby ward. And one of our friends was going out to Zambia on a missions trip to go help some of the poorest people in the community out there. And she needed someone who was medical to help. And our kids were young at the time, and our friend Alison came to Debbie and said, Deb, would you come with me? I mean, I've got some teachers and some hygienists and nutritionists. I don't have any medical people. I'd love you to come out and help mums with their young babies get better at mothering. Just for 3 weeks, we'll be in Zambia. And Debbie came back from that meeting to me and she said, they've asked me to go, but I'm not ready. I would like to go one day, but I'm not ready. I'm not ready because we have to raise a couple of £1,000 to get on a plane. And we've got young kids and cost of living and we can't afford it really. So I'm not ready to do that. I'm not ready to leave the kids on their own. I mean, you know, they won't have a mum for 3 weeks and you can't feed them. And you know, probably you'll burn the house down, Duncan. So I don't feel ready to leave them. And God said, Debbie Banks, I'm calling you and I'm sending you out to Zambia, ready or not. 3 weeks later, I wish I'd have put the picture on the screen. 3 weeks later, me and the three lads, she wasn't expecting this, Debbie. She was expecting to land at Heathrow Airport, get into a minibus with some of the others on the team, drive back to our home in Suffolk and get dropped off. But me and my three boys decided to meet her at Heathrow. It was like 8 o'clock in the morning and got them out of bed early and dressed them up. Got big signs out of these kids. I've got a lovely picture of the kids standing going, hello, Mum. And she walked out, you know, that arrivals place. And I thought, something's wrong here because she had no shoes on her feet and no bag. I said, babes, what's your shoes? Where's your bag? She said, they are so poor out there. They have nothing. I've just got my clothes. I left everything else for them. We have to do something to help this community. So we got into the car and drove. She said, I need to go round to the elders' house of the church. I said, what, now? You haven't had a shower. You stink. She said, no, I need to go. Took her to the elders. She explained the story to the elders. Long story short, 10 years later, our church has been helping this community. We've built orphanages. We've helped hundreds and hundreds of families, sent thousands and thousands of pounds. In fact, 2 people from the church over the past 10 years have been living out there full-time on mission. All because Debbie said, I'm not ready, but God said, I'm sending you out ready or not. And the world started to change. So back to our story. How can these 11 people go and change the world when there is only 11? They're under-resourced and they're all doubting whether Jesus really is who he says he is. How can they do it? Here's how. You get to the last little bit of Matthew chapter 28. Jesus is giving them the mission. And look what he says. Jesus came and told these disciples, go. I know you don't feel ready. I know you want to sit here and wait, but no, I'm asking you to go. Go and make disciples of all nations. All nations. Does he mean get on a plane and go to Zambia? No, all nations means go and make disciples of people who are different to you, who don't think like you think, who come from the other side of the track. They might have a different skin color to you, speak a different language to you, but they might just live the street next to you. Go to those people, everybody from different worldviews, and baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And teach these new disciples to do the things that I've been teaching you. Teach them my commands and teach them to obey the commands I've given you. Yeah, that's a big commission, God. But there's only 11 of us. Some of us are just not sure. Jesus says, this is how and why you can go. And be sure of this, Jesus says, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. That's why you can go. Jesus doesn't say, go, disciples, you're ready for this big world-changing mission. No, no, no. He says, go, and I'll be with you. That's all you need. You need to know that I'll be with you. You see, this was a really big commission Jesus was asking these disciples to do, to change the world. He has no plan B. And it's the people who just don't feel ready to go. Back in the mid-90s, I was working for an organization called Christians in Sport. We used to work with high-profile athletes. And once a year, we would take a bunch of footballers. Some were young professionals, some were current professionals, and others were ex-professionals. We'd take them out to Atlanta in America to run soccer camps. And one of these lads was a young lad. He's not young anymore, but he was a young lad. He just signed for Manchester City. His name was Carlo. He was so excited about going out to the States, never been before. Excited he'd got this big contract playing for Manchester City. And my job on the trip was kind of team pastor and team minibus driver. And one day while we were in Atlanta, we were there for about 3 weeks doing these different soccer camps, Carlo called me up and he said, Banksy, I need you to get round here at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning because I've booked a parachute jump. So I said, Carlo, I've got young kids. I'm just not sure about jumping out of it. He said, no, not for you, you know, useless southerner. He said, it's for me. I just need you to drive me there. So I said, oh, yeah, fine, no trouble. So I got up early, picked him up, took him to this little airstrip, stood with him at the back of this briefing that went on about the parachute jump. Then I saw him get into a plane and head up into the sky and watch the plane disappearing through the clouds. And then I could just vaguely see this thing floating down towards the airfield again, getting bigger and bigger. And he landed about 100 yards away from me. And when he landed, he undid himself and he ran across to me, shaking like a leaf. And he goes, Banksy, Banksy, it's the greatest thing I've ever done. It's so exciting, it's so exciting. Now, we got into the van and I started driving him home. And I said, talk me through it, Carlo. He said, well, we got up in the plane and I was all buzzing and exciting, couldn't wait for it. And then some guy opens this huge door at the side of the plane and the noise and the wind blowing in. He said, I panicked. I thought, I'm not going to do this. I can't do this. And so the guy at the door shouted at the top of his voice. He said, Carlo, are you ready? And Carlo said, no, I'm not ready. And Carlo said, just at that moment, a little voice in his ear said, don't worry, Carlo, I am. Because he was strapped to another instructor. And the other instructor walked them to the edge, pushed themselves out, and he floated down to planet Earth. You see, you're on the edge of something, right? God is calling you into something. You know what it is. You don't have to dig very deep. There's something God is asking you to do. And you're right on the edge and you think, I'm not ready, it's too scary, it's too noisy. And God is saying, I know you're not ready, but I'm strapped to you. I'm your 12th man. I'm with you. Let's do this thing together. Let's do this thing together. Jesus doesn't say, go, you're ready. Jesus says, go and I'll be with you. Every day, God comes to people and says, would you take a risk for me? You're risk averse. You like your comfort zone. Would you take a risk for me? Would you love someone that everybody else finds difficult to love, but I'm calling you to love them? Would you connect with someone who's disconnected? Everybody else ignores them, but could you connect with them? Could you share your resources, your home? Could you share your time? Could you give some of your cash towards something great happening? Could you serve? Could you volunteer? Could you sign up for a ministry here at the church? I know everybody else seems to be doing it, and I know you don't feel like you're good enough, but I'm calling you. And I'm sending you out, ready or not. Maybe for some of us, God is saying, would you talk to me for the first time? I know you've come to church because you've been dragged along this morning with the promise of a lunch afterwards. But you've been dragged along and you're not sure whether God actually exists. And you wonder whether over time there's things that have happened. And you thought, I wonder. Maybe God is saying to you, God, talk to me. For the first time, talk to me. Would you take a risk and do that? And listen, as a church, as EBC, as a church, now is not the time to pull back. This is the time to be courageous like you've never been courageous before. Listen, this is the time to invite friends like you've never invited them before. I don't feel ready to invite the people at the squash club or the mums at the school gate or the neighbor. I'm not ready. I know God says you don't feel ready, but I'm calling you to do that. I'm sending you out, ready or not, and I'm going to be with you as you do. And the stories are going to be amazing. And we'll have to knock this place down and build something twice as big because you need to bring your friends. Now's the time to do that. Now's the time to give like you've never given before, to serve, to volunteer like you've never volunteered before, to pray like you've never prayed before. This is the time to be bold. This is the time to innovate, to do new things. You know, one pastor, a guy called Craig Groeschel, he said this. I love this. He said, to reach people no one is reaching, we're going to have to do some things that no one else is doing. How profound is that? I've been to Google University on your behalf. I did it last night. Do you know there are just under 21,000 people in 2021 living in Emsworth, in the town? 21,000 people. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guessed that right now, this morning, there's probably, I mean, this might be a little stretchy, but I reckon there's probably about 2,000 people in here, in the Evangelical Church, the Church of England, some of the other churches in the town. Maybe 2,000 is too many, I don't know, say 2,000. But there's 19,000 people who are disconnected from God. 19,000 people who are going to a lost eternity because everybody spends eternity somewhere, right? 19,000 people that no one is reaching. The Church of England can't reach them. You guys are not reaching them. The Free Evangelical Church are not reaching them. 19,000 people. And in order to reach those people, maybe you're going to have to do some things that no one else is doing to reach the people that no one else is reaching. Now is the time to do those kind of things. Let me finish with this. I want to introduce you to Summer, my dog. You can't resist those eyes, can you? I can't resist those eyes, which is why she's overweight, because I treat her all the time. She's in my kitchen in that picture. And I did this little experiment with Summer, because Summer comes into the kitchen. Every time I make a cup of coffee, she comes into the kitchen and she wants treats. And Summer has two types of treats. She has little tiny treats, and I give her a handful, and she fills her cheeks with them. And she's also got a big bone-like treat, and that's her favorite. She loves the big, juicy bone-like treat. But whatever treat you give her, she runs off through the kitchen, along the hallway, into the lounge, and she hunkers down in the corner of the lounge, the same spot, and she eats whatever treats you give her. And so I tried this little experiment with her a little while ago. I gave her a handful of her little treats. She filled her cheeks, quite happy, wagged her tail, turned around and began to walk out of the kitchen. As she got out of the kitchen and into the hallway, I popped the lid on the tin of her big bone treat that she absolutely loves. And I heard her stop and turn round and pad back in. And she stood in front of me, bulging cheeks with these things. And I held the bone in front of her mouth. And she couldn't put the bone in her mouth because it was full of other treats. And she was in a total and utter dilemma. Do I spit out those treats and take the bone? What do I do? kind of like Jesus is standing in this room now, and he said, look, I've got something for you, the gift of life. The way he described it in John's Gospel was, I've come to give you life, the life you've always wanted. I've come to give it to you, an abundant life. But in order for you to take hold of that, you've got to let go of what you're holding on to now. In order for you to grab hold of this new future, Emsworth Baptist Church, that God is calling you into, you might have to let go of some of the things that you love right now. Because there's a bigger thing that God's got for you. Are you prepared to let go of some of the little things? To grab hold of the adventure that God's got in store for you? Let me stop. Coming into land now, you're okay. Richard Attenborough. You know, he does all those programs. Normally he's in the jungle in Borneo doing those amazing BBC programs he does. David Attenborough, not Richard, David Attenborough. He did one program a little while ago that baffled me. It wasn't in Borneo, I think he was in Kent. He did a program about the Commoner Garden tortoise. The final scene in the program was this beautifully manicured lawn in Kent, and there was this little tortoise slowly meandering its way over it. And Attenborough's words were so powerful, I'll never forget them. He said, a tortoise only starts to make progress when it sticks its neck out. A tortoise will only make progress when it sticks its neck out. Listen, you can live cozy, comfy in your shell, and that's fine. But if you want adventure, if you want progress, if you want forward momentum, if you want the life that God has promised you, you're going to have to do some things that no one else is doing. You're going to have to stick your neck out. But I'm not ready. I don't feel like I've got what it takes. I know God says. But I'm sending you out anyway, ready or not. And the promise is, I'll be with you every step of the way. Let's pray. Father, what a joy to know that despite our nervousness and our fear of jumping out of the plane, despite our anxiety about getting out of our shell, out of our comfort zone, we can hear your voice calling us today. And it's different for every one of us. We all know there's something we should be stepping out into, but we're all a little bit afraid about it. And we hear you this morning say, I'm sending you anyway, despite the knocking knees and the sweaty palms. I'm sending you anyway. And I'm going to be with you. You'll feel my presence in a way you've never felt my presence before. And so we jump, Lord. Whatever it takes, we say to you, we're in. We don't want to miss out. We don't want to say no to the big bone. We don't want to say no because we're not prepared to let go of some of the things we're used to. And so God, hear our cry, hear our prayer. We want that life you're describing. We're jumping. Count us in Jesus' name. And everybody agreed and said,